once again. This is Nuance. As always, I am Mike Scala, joined by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Getting started. Good morning here.
Yes, as the sun is about to go down in New York, maybe a little bit more now that it's beginning of the summer. We got more sunlight, but mornings for you, and we're in the evening here in New York.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's going on with you?
Working, trying to get this music stuff done. Really excited about this project.
I hear that. That's what's up. That's definitely what's up. So
yeah, we're talking about those high pass filters to run the vocals through and everything. All this technical stuff. Sometimes you got to get those mixes just right, but that's important. When you spend all that time working on the music, you want to make sure it's presented in the best way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's oftentimes like you as the artist, you're going to hear something that someone else won't hear, and it can drive you crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Because someone else might be able to hear it. I mean, maybe most people won't, but there's someone out there who can hear what you're hearing, and you just want to present it in the best way, right?
Right.
So
something.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, like it could even be like an inflection. It could be a way you said a word that you're not comfortable with. It could be a frequency.
Yeah.
Like I think I've noticed in my voice, there's like a frequency in my voice at around the 15,000 range that just kind of irritates me through when it comes through the microphone in a recording. So I have to always go in and adjust that a little bit.
Right. Or it could be a P popped too loud, a T that's hitting too hard, a syllable that's too loud. Maybe you said a rhyme. The next rhyme you intended it to hit the same way, but you said that second word much too loud. So now you're manually trying to lower it, and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there's that. I did see something online that was interesting. I think I sent it to you a while back. They were asking if you would rather have $40 million or 40 million friends. Was that what it was? I forget the exact.
It was something like that. It was, I don't know if it was 40, but it was that was the exact premise. It's like, yeah, do you want this amount of friends or this amount of dollars?
Yeah.
I think it was we can go with 40.
It might have been 4 million, maybe $4 million or 4 million loyal friends. That might have been it.
Yeah, we can go with that.
Yeah. It's interesting to me as a little thought experiment, because I think a lot of people's first inclination is to be like, what am I going to do with so many friends anyway? I'll just take the money. But then if you think about it a little bit deeper, you start to say, well, if the goal is the money, you could end up with more money if you had the loyal friends. But let's assume that they're loyal enough to support your business, right? Now you sell them all something for $1, you already made up that money. So there's that.
Right.
Then you start to think about it even deeper, and you think, yeah, but that's a lot of work. I mean, how are you going to contact 4 million people, even if they are your friends? Like, maybe the money is better. You know what I mean? So you kind of go back and forth, I think, depending on how deeply you start thinking about it. And
yeah,
money isn't even the goal, right? Maybe you just want friends, but 4 million is a lot of them. And just because they're loyal doesn't mean they're not difficult.
Yeah, that's just true. My initial reaction was, yeah, take the friends. Because I mean, if you can get $1 from each of them, then you got the same amount of money. Like, right. It's like they're loyal. Like, hey, can I get $1? And then
yeah, but so let's unpack that. First of all, yes, I think that is a thought that you have, but do you typically go around asking your friends for dollars? I mean, you're only doing this to try to make up the money that you lost from the initial offer, right?
Right. But I mean, like you said, if the goal is the money,
yeah,
then if you go that route and you do ask each friend for $1,
asking for $5 coming out ahead.
Now you've got the $4 million and you've got the friends. With the other way, you just have the money, you have no friends. I mean, I'm sure people will gravitate to you because you got $4 million, but they might not be people that are there for the right reasons.
But think about the logistics of that. How long is it going to take to ask and receive $1 from 4 million people, even if they are loyal to you?
Right.
I mean, that does seem Herculean effort.
Yeah, right.
Sit down and send 4 million texts or make 4 million calls.
Use MailChimp. I don't know.
Yeah, but with that big of a list, you can get a lot of spam filters.
Yeah, not to mention the monthly bill is going to be stupid.
Yeah, I mean, do you need like to hire full-time workers to hit up all these loyal friends? I mean, it does seem like it's becoming a big project.
Right. Well,
$1 million is just there, right? Immediately.
let's think about this. If you've got 4 million loyal friends,
Right. They might also ask you for money.
I think we can also assume if they're loyal, that a good portion is going to be checking for you and what you do. So you
Not
can
if they
put up a
know
video.
there are 3,999,999 others.
Yeah, but you could put up a video saying, let me get $1 or something. Or you could put up a product, like you said, a product to sell for $1. And then
I think you have to contact them directly. Here's the thing, if you put up a video, because I've seen an iteration of this in politics, people have this idea that other people are doing what they're being asked of. So like if you send an email to 1,000 friends asking them to make a donation, it's not that they don't want to give a donation, but they're thinking it's not so urgent that they do it because probably a lot of other people did.
Right. If you contact them directly, then they think it's a one-to-one.
It's a one-to-one thing. Yeah.
That's true. Jennifer in the chat said GoFundMe. That's another way to collect the funds as well.
Do a GoFundMe, but don't you still have to contact all those people and ask that they contribute to your GoFundMe or put it before them somehow? I mean, Facebook only gives you 5,000 friends. You got 4 million people to get to. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. I mean, could you have had 4 million friends in MySpace days? I didn't think they capped.
I don't think there was a limit, was there?
I don't know.
I don't think so. No,
are they all following you? Are they following you on Twitter or Instagram? Are these 4 million people following you on social media?
Even if they are, do you really think they're all seeing everything that you post? And like I said, even if they're a loyal friend, are they going to see a tweet from you and think urgent enough that they contribute when they think in their heads probably he's got millions of friends? I'm sure 100,000 people giving him money. I'll get to him when I get to him, but I'm sure he's good.
Right.
Everyone is thinking that, right? And that slows it down.
Right. So a product would be good, a digital product, so you don't have to manufacture. So it could be music, it could be, ebooks or something. Drop ship T-shirts, like print on demand type of thing. Those are possible, and it's less because if you're trying to service 4 million orders, like you're going to go insane.
That's what I'm saying. This is a big operation now. This reminds me of collecting those bottles to get the fighter jet that we talked about.
Right.
At first, they were like, "Oh, this is great. We'll get a fighter jet by just drinking Pepsi." And before they knew it, they were renting warehouses and hiring staffs and everything.
Right. So, and then, the opposite is to say, okay, well, let's just get the $4 million. And I've already got my set of friends now. Right. What do I need these other friends?
4 million loyal friends. That's a lot. And honestly, to have 4 million loyal friends, that's a lot of time and energy that you probably have to spend to keep up those friendships.
Maybe.
Or are we stipulating that they're just loyal to you without anything in return? Because those 4 million people are going to be asking you for a lot of things too, probably.
Oh, yeah, sure. They're going to contact, conversation, There's also, imagine running a political campaign. You got 4 million loyal friends. You're probably going to win.
That. You can run for governor, you can run for president. Loyal friends. You'll have a whole army.
Yeah. So you're probably going to win. That's an option.
Unless they're all in another country or something and they can't really do much.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you're in New York and like your 4 million friends are like somewhere in like Asia and Europe. Yeah, it's like, it doesn't help me in this campaign.
And then what if all 4 million people were presented with the same question, and now all 4 million people are asking all of their 4 million friends for money?
What do you mean?
So what if 4 million people that you chose to be your friends all have that same idea, basically? They're all coming to you and they're like, can I get $1? Can I get $10? Now you have 4 million people asking you for money.
Right. So it's not as cut and dry as it appears on the surface.
Yeah.
Did you decide what you would do?
Ahead in terms of the money, I think just taking the money is a simpler way to go.
Yeah, much simpler,
Less
obviously.
of a
Yeah.
hassle.
It's logistically and like you said, hassle wise, just
Practically, yeah.
practically. And then you've already got your friends and your family. It's already around you.
Right.
Now you've got
Right.
$4 million that you can use for yourself and for them. You know, if
4
that's
million friendships sounds like a problem. Like, that doesn't sound, you know what I mean? Like, it sounds great. You have 4 million people loyal to you, but you're talking about 4 million friendships. Like, those are relationships that need to be kept up and worked on, right?
that's true too. That's true too. So what did you decide? What would you choose?
Well,
Jennifer,
a genie
huh?
didn't actually come to me and present this. I wish they would have, but it didn't really happen, alas.
What would you choose?
I don't know. I think I would have to be the lawyer and ask what the terms and conditions of these friendships were. Like, what does it mean? Because it's who has
Right.
14 loyal friends? What does that really mean, right? And what are the expectations here?
Right. I think that's the prudent way to do it. That's like it's like that story of like the genie in the lamp, right? When people ask for a wish and they get it, but they don't get it exactly what they're thinking because they didn't work out what the stipulations are. They're like, yeah, you know, make me super rich. Well, okay, yeah, you're super rich, but you're super rich in flowers now. Like it's not
Or the whole
exactly.
thing is like, I'll give you 3 wishes. You're like, okay, I'm going to game the system by saying my wish is to get an unlimited number of wishes. And like, nah, like you should have read the fine print that wasn't allowed. Now you get nothing.
Yeah. So, what about James, Jennifer in the chat? These are the ones that I can see in there. What would you choose? $4 million or 4 million loyal friends? Yeah.
Let's see some answers.
So, yeah, I'm thinking that now. I first thought the friends. I'm thinking the money now.
So you thought the friends, interesting, because you thought that you were going to be able to make even more money.
Well, I was thinking, I didn't really think about the contact. It was just more like, in the context of the question, what would be better? The idea that having to do the logistics of contacting each one is just like, oh, well, you got 4 million friends, you just automatically have a way to contact them. But it's still 4 million. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's quite a lot. But I don't know.
Think about that also. Practically speaking, if you were to give person A $4 million and person B 4 million loyal friends and say, now contact these 4 million loyal people and get $1 million get $4 million out of them. How long do you think it would take person B to get what person A got? I mean, in that time, person A could have invested that first 4 million and probably made a lot more.
Yeah. Now there's also, here's the thing is, it doesn't even have to be like asking those 4 million friends for money. Let's say you got 4 million loyal friends and you decide to, again, you say you start a YouTube channel, right? Theoretically, you'd get monetized very quickly because you've got 4 million people that are going to subscribe and watch your stuff constantly. You've got a steady stream of income right there. If your goal is income at this point.
Right. And that's how I would do it.
Products. Yeah.
I wouldn't just ask them for money. I wouldn't be like, give me $5. I would try to sell them my album or something.
Yeah. So, but $4 million immediately, that's life-changing money on the spot. So that's something to think about as well.
I mean, but 4 million friends is also life-changing.
Yeah, that's pretty true. That's pretty true. We got Jennifer saying money is the easy way, as you said. James said, show me the money. I don't know 4 million people.
And do you want to know 4 million people also?
Do you want? I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting proposition,
Yeah.
So birthday parties would be nice, lots of gifts. That's true too. That could be a logistic nightmare too, though.
That's true. Inviting them all. But if you get married, let's say, and invite all 4 million people, first of all, you need to rent out. I don't know what kind of place would hold 4 million people. There's no place that would, right? But if you were to somehow get 4 million people at your wedding, if you think about them all bringing you a gift, there you go.
No, I'm thinking birthday. They're the gift thing. Right? Imagine getting a gift from 4 million different people. Like logistically, that's a nightmare too. That's a headache. 4 million people, 4 million gifts show up at your house at one time.
That's like 4 million thank you cards you have to handwrite. Good luck.
and 4 million things you have to deal with. Like, how do I get rid of this? Where do I put all this stuff?
That's what I'm saying, right? Like 4 million friends sounds like a problem.
That's possible.
Friendships take work.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. And they're not all going to respect your boundaries, Jonah Hill.
Oh, we going to get into that? I think we can get into
a little bit.
I think yeah. So for people not aware,
because everyone is talking about this, and I find it kind of fascinating to get people's opinions on it.
Right. So
share screen, that screenshot, which I don't know if that makes us part of the problem, because honestly, I was kind of taken aback by the very fact that a private message was shared like that. But it is in the public now, and everyone's talking about it.
And so for people not aware, apparently right now what's been going viral this past week is Jonah Hill's ex-girlfriend has shared old text messages from him, where he's saying he's setting boundaries, and other people are saying that he's trying to be manipulative and controlling in their relationship. And so she's sharing this text message, and it's not just this one. Like what we were looking at, there was one, but there's like 10, 15 more.
And these were from 2021, I believe.
Right. And I think another aspect, and I might not have it completely clear, but it sounded like she waited to share these until his current girlfriend was giving birth or something like that.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah, I was wondering why they were coming out now.
Right. So like she just, like they've been apart, I guess, for this whole time, but he's got another girlfriend and they're going through something. And so she's sharing this now. Like why? What's the point? Well,
and should that be part of the conversation? Because I'm not seeing that. Now, admittedly, I'm not looking at everyone's commentary on this, but I am seeing it pop up on all the social media feeds. So I'm getting little bits of it. But shouldn't that be the conversation, or at least a bigger part of it? Why is that cool to do?
Right.
Share someone's private messages years later, or really at any time. But, you're waiting a couple of years and you're putting old text messages online for everyone to see. I mean, isn't that a betrayal of someone's trust?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're not even in the relationship anymore, why are you putting that out there? What's the purpose? What's the point? Especially if he's in a happy relationship with someone else, and if what I saw was true, where like, his current girlfriend or is pregnant or going or giving birth or whatever, like, why would you interfere in that? Well, that kind of makes her seem a little jaded in that regard. But again, I don't know. And you were the one that put me up on it. I had no idea what was going on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I kept seeing it, and people keep saying that he's misusing the word boundary. And I found that to be interesting. But I saw someone claim that this was therapy language he was using. So they said it seemed manipulative because it was like he was using words that a psychologist would use, but he's not really using them the right way, or he's using them in a manipulative or controlling way. That's what people were saying.
Right. So, yeah, so he sent, I guess they were going through something, and he sent her a text in their text message conversation. He's saying what he doesn't like her doing, right? And a few of the things he didn't want her posting, swimsuit pictures on her social media. He didn't want her putting sexual pictures on her social media, inappropriate relationships with men. He didn't want her to do modeling. I think there was one other thing I don't remember. And he's saying that, look, if you want to do these things, that's great. If these things make you happy, that's great. I'm fine with it. I support you, but we can't be together. Like, I'm not the guy for you. And so that was his text message. And so people are taking sides saying, well, this is very manipulative and controlling. And other people are saying how he's just setting his boundaries, what he will deal with in a relationship. And so that's where people are back and forth on it.
Yeah. And see, with me, I was trying not to get too deep into the specifics of what his demands were, what his wishes were, because I don't know what he's even referring to. I don't know what their relationship was, like whatever. But I think that's really a subjective thing. I mean, it's really about what makes you comfortable in a relationship. And that goes for both parties. So I think as a general premise, both parties should be able to express what they're comfortable with and what they're not. And neither one has to be with the other if they don't like it, So I don't really see that as being a bad thing inherently.
I think some of it is how it was one-sided. It was more about what she had to do. and not anything that included him. So it's like, okay, you have to do this to make this relationship work.
Yeah, but she can say the same thing to him, right? She can say,
you could.
I don't like that about what you do. I don't want to be with you if you do this.
Yeah, she definitely could. Also, there was a little bit of context that I did see, because, once you sent it to me, like I started looking into it a little bit more. Apparently, when they met, I mean, her profession is professional surfing instructor. Yeah. And that's what she was doing when they met. That's her livelihood. And so, being in bikinis and bathing suits and around, people of the opposite sex sure. is going to be part of her career. And that's what sure. she was doing when they met. So for him to come be in this relationship now and say, you can't do right. what you do, that is kind of a controlling thing. That's not really
it seems, objectively speaking, very unreasonable to think of you with someone who does this for a living or whatever, and right. say she can't do that anymore. But from her perspective, she can just say, okay, well, but this is what I do, and I value doing this more than I value this relationship, unfortunately for you. And I'm going to there's nothing stopping her from doing that. So I still don't see why he's not allowed to express what his desires. I agree. That's like a weird thing and seems unreasonable to demand of someone if that's the case. But again, I think he's allowed to say what he would feel comfortable with, and she's allowed to say what she would feel comfortable with, and either they come to an agreement or they don't, Right. And there was a message at the bottom of that, and that one specific text message, and he said something that kind of alluded to something maybe happening prior that made there was definitely something going on there that caused trust issues.
Right. He said something about this.
And they were also, from what I heard, they were in couples therapy. And so, I mean, something that was going on probably wasn't the healthiest relationship in the first place, right? Right. Yeah. They were in couples therapy. Matter of fact, he put out a documentary that he produced in conjunction with his therapist about therapy. And I did look at some of the other messages. Apparently, the therapist got her to agree. I saw that
anytime a man, like while they were surfing, if a man came up near her, that she agreed to swim away from him.
That's just odd. That's just weird. Yeah,
that's very odd.
I'm not an expert in therapy, but it doesn't seem like a very good therapist.
No, that does not. That does sound more controlling in that regard. Like, you can't even, if someone comes in your vicinity of the opposite sex, like, you have to swim away. Like, what?
Especially from the therapist's part. Yeah.
Right. And then again, that's if we're believing what she's saying. We don't know the other side, but that's what she's saying. But
I mean, it's an interesting question also, because where do you draw the line between setting boundaries and being controlling, as they say? I mean,
right.
A relationship and something about what the other person is doing is upsetting or making you uncomfortable, or you're not allowed to communicate that, or you're not allowed to say, I'm sorry, I can't be with someone who does these things. I mean, at what point does that cross the line into being controlling?
Right. And generally the difference is that like, setting boundaries is generally seen as you setting something that you won't do or is not acceptable to you, whereas controlling is you trying to set something that they can't do.
Yeah, but is it something?
It's a blurred line. It's a little semantic, and it's a blurred line, because if you're saying like, oh,
they're grown adults.
If you go out and do this, I can't be with you, then still kind of him setting the boundary, but at the same time telling her what she shouldn't do. Kind of.
But I don't know. Yeah.
It's kind of blurred.
The thing is, they're both adults, right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a consensual relationship. And so no one is forcing anyone to do anything.
Right.
If she doesn't like what he's saying, she can bounce, and he can bounce if he doesn't like what she's doing what she's saying. I mean, so how can you really control anyone unless you allow yourself to be controlled, I guess?
Yeah. And he did say in there, look, if this is what you're into, then, and it makes you happy, I support you. I just can't be, I'm just not the guy for you.
Right. And I think some people are maybe casting judgment on the context of what he was saying, not so much the act of him saying, I can't be with someone who makes me uncomfortable in these ways. But I think they were looking at his list of things and trying to judge each point by how reasonable they were, right? Because if it was something that I think people agreed with, then maybe they would take his side on it. And I wasn't trying to judge either way what the list was, the content of his list. I was just more looking at it from the perspective of, is it acceptable to tell someone I'm not comfortable in this relationship under these parameters. And you might look at it like an ultimatum. You might think that that's not fair, but from the other side, maybe the person might appreciate you telling them, basically, this is a warning. Like, I would just break up with you, but I don't think you want me to break up with you. So I'm telling you, I'm about to if this doesn't change.
Yeah. I would like to talk with get a therapist or psychologist to make this.
Not that one.
Not that one. To make the differentiation like very clear. Like, how do you because ultimately, if you boil down either way, the result is still the same, right? If this doesn't change, we can't be together. It doesn't matter how you ask, what you say. If you say,
right,
this makes me feel uncomfortable when you are as my girlfriend on there and you're in these clothes and whatever, your butt's all out. This makes me feel uncomfortable, whatever. Or you say, yeah, if you put that on there, I can't be with you. Yeah. Ultimately, the goal, the point is still the same. It's just you're saying it a little different. So maybe there's something that we're missing in the way.
Yeah. I mean, some might say he should just break up with her then, but I don't know if everyone would appreciate someone just breaking up with you as opposed to trying to talk to you about it first.
Right.
I don't know. And I think the fact that you said, like, this is what she did, and he's basically saying now you can't do what you do, you can't be who you are. I think that really was getting wrong. That's just a weird thing. But again, I don't know the ins and outs of that relationship and everything that was said and discussed. And, I don't know them. But, that itself does seem unreasonable, right? I was telling you once, someone would be smoking in my car, like blowing smoke in my face. Like, that didn't make me comfortable. And I would say, please don't smoke in my car. Please, I don't want to be around someone who's smelling like smoke all the time, who's always blowing smoke in my face. I thought that was appropriate to communicate that. Like, listen, if you want to do that, fine. I'm not going to try to stop you. I'm just saying I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be in that kind of relationship, which to me, maybe the content of what they were arguing about was different, but taking a step back, it seemed like he was trying to do something similar by saying, if you want to do this thing that I don't like, that's on you. I just don't want to be around it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I listened to a couple of different people giving their opinions on it. Like, you sent me on like a good 30-minute spiral into this thing. And I didn't get a sense that it was very clear on what the line was here. People just didn't seem to like that he told her that he didn't like that.
And is she entitled to a relationship with a guy who doesn't like what she's doing?
Not entitled. She has the option to leave.
Yeah.
I did see now. Again, some of it can be part of the context because one of the other messages that he sent. He was talking, I guess, about long-term wanting to have a long-term relationship, and he's talking about we need to basically be more mature in certain things or whatever. But he also said, listen, I've got my stuff too that I'm dealing with. So it sounded like he even took into account some of whatever his issues are. But again, I'm sure there's a lot to the story that we don't know.
Right. And also, it goes back to, why is this private business out there in the public in the first place?
That's another question. That's a question I don't think anyone's really asking. Like, why would she even post that?
Yeah.
You don't do that. What's the point of it? Especially you guys aren't in a relationship anymore. It's been, I guess, a year or two or whatever it is. Why do you have to feel the need to put that out there?
I mean, unless people truly believe this is predatory and dangerous behavior, and like she's doing the public a service by warning them not to get involved with this monster. I mean, if they think it's that bad.
Well, that the only way that would be, because she's the one who released them.
Yeah.
Would be is if maybe she saw him doing something with his current girlfriend or other girls or other women that seems to be, like you said, predatory or whatever. And she's like, okay, look, he's got a pattern here. Look at this.
Right. But then you could also just warn those women on the side and not post it publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this definitely an aspect to that. Like, I think part of that plays into him being famous.
Right.
Yeah. Because she could have just reached out to whoever he's dating now and be like, hey, look, keep an eye out. Jennifer in the chat brought that up. Maybe she shared these messages now because she's trying to look out for the new girl. Once a woman has a baby with a man, it's not easy to leave him. If he is like that with one woman, he would do it with all his women. Yeah, but she could have reached out to her directly instead of putting it out in the public where it's going to hit the tabloids and the news and social media and put his, that private business out in the public. There's definitely some kind of other aspect there. So.
Well, I'm interested in responses.
Yeah.
I think.
And I would like to, again, that distinction of, I think that's an interesting one. The lines are a little bit blurred as far as setting boundaries and being seen as manipulating the other person. I'd like to hear a professional clarify that point. Yeah, right. Here's the
one of the texts, and it was the first one that I saw.
Right. This is the one that most people are really going in on.
Mm-hmm.
And this sparked, if you look on the internet, this sparked a lot of, I guess, think pieces in several different news publications about the misuse of therapist speak.
Right.
Right.
And you can read it here, like, if these things bring you to a place of happiness. I don't go to therapy, but I can imagine these phrases being used in therapy, right?
Yeah. And my boundaries, these are my boundaries for my romantic partnership. This is all therapist language. And
places. Yeah, I can see that being a term.
Right. And so this type of language is being misused. And these articles were talking about how this language is being misused in public dialogue now and in interpersonal relationships when these are therapist type of languages. People are using them for purposes that maybe they weren't intended to, or they're kind of twisting them a little bit to get their own needs met.
Right. But is the word boundaries being misused there? And if so, how? Because I look at that like a subjective thing. So how could you tell him what his boundaries can or can't be?
Yeah, it's a good point.
If, he might be unreasonable to 99% of people, but it's up to his partner to decide if they want to tolerate that from him or not, right?
Yeah. They're not together, so it seemed to me like, it was probably for the best.
Right.
And just move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I would be interested in hearing from a professional on what's the clear distinction between, setting boundaries and being manipulative.
Right. And can we just get to the point, like going back to the smoking in my car? Do I have to say it would make me comfortable if you didn't smoke in my car? Okay, maybe that would, but they're still going to smoke in my car unless I don't want them to. Right.
Right. And it's funny. I had that saying. I told you briefly that I did this exercise with ChatGPT in that same regard.
Oh, yeah. So tell me about that.
Right. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see. I told you sent me on a spiral on this thing. And so I said, well, this is the message. There are people on both sides. What's the assessment here? And it came up back with this. There are elements of this being controlling and manipulative. And so my point was that, okay, but if he's setting his boundaries, how is this being controlling, manipulative? And it was more about what is the general logic is that he's setting things that she has to do instead of what he is going to do.
Is he kind of saying in a nice way, I'm going to break up with you?
It's generally, from the sense that I got with that conversation was that it's more about the tone. Right. And how you say it. And it kept saying that it was more about focusing on her and her failures and her lack instead of on something that they could do together or that they could discuss together. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to discuss about how this makes me feel or how this makes you feel or something in that regard.
That's something. I'm like, yeah. I did hear that when I was younger. I guess people still use this construction. Like they would say, if you're going to talk to someone, don't talk about what they did. Talk about how it makes you feel.
Right.
Like when you do this, I feel disappointed or something like that, as opposed to just saying like you shouldn't do this.
Right. And so that was kind of the gist of it. And so I brought in this concept of soft boundaries and hard boundaries, right? Because there are soft boundaries that are pliable that, you could be uncomfortable with, but you can live with. But there are hard boundaries that you just will not tolerate. For example, if you discover your partner is shooting up heroin, right? That's a hard boundary for you. I will not be in a relationship with you if you keep doing heroin.
That's a great point that you just brought up. So, and that's why I think people are focusing on the content of his little bullet points there, as opposed to premise stuff. Because what if you put that in there? What if the message was exactly the same, but those little bullet points were, when you shoot up heroin, when you go and you run over ducks on purpose, like all these like terrible things, things that we agree are not positive attributes, right? And then you put, these are my boundaries. I can't be in a relationship with someone who does these things. Would people still be calling him controlling and manipulative at that point?
Right. And I think that's part of it, where people are looking at what they might find agreeable or disagreeable, right? Or reasonable or unreasonable.
Right.
Her being a surf instructor and having pictures on her Instagram in her bathing suit is not unreasonable. It's kind of par for the course. It's kind of what comes with the territory. She's going to be in her bathing suit the majority of her day.
Right.
So that's normal. So I think some of that plays into it.
Yeah.
And my thought process with this, or at least my conversational path with this, was that, okay, so I said, why don't you rewrite this in a way that's not manipulative, and that would not serve that purpose of manipulation, but does set the boundaries. So it rewrote it, and it was more of like what you mentioned, like, this is how it makes me feel, or we should come together and talk about this. We should, and I said, well, this sounds more like a negotiation, but what if these are his hard boundaries?
And do you want her to be caught off guard if you're making it sound like it's not as urgent to you as it really is, right? Like, hey, maybe we should talk about this a little bit. Maybe she doesn't want to talk about it. Next thing you know, he just breaks up, and then she's like, how come you didn't warn me you weren't happy in your relationship? Like, because I tried to, but I used too soft language, right?
Right. And so that was kind of the gist of it. I was like, okay, I get that. So the way he said it, the way that you wrote it, I had it in several iterations. I said, but the ultimate core to this is that if this behavior continues, then he doesn't want to be in the relationship. I said, it doesn't matter how you say it. The core is still exactly the same. One's just saying it in a different tone than the other. I was like, how is that any different than, a boundary or manipulation? And, it's like, well, yeah, you're right. That point is the same. But it's important in this to have certain types of communication. So according to ChatGPT, it basically boiled down to how you delivered the message.
And I'm laughing because now we're asking AI to help solve our psychological issue, which is scary.
Oh, we're going to get there. Believe me, we're going to get there. We've already got them writing our bills, which is what we're going to get into.
Yeah.
So, I think it's there are going to be different aspects to this. I would love to talk to a professional and hear how they differentiate these things. I think part of it has to do with the actions themselves, how people find them, whether they're agreeable or disagreeable, or they're reasonable or not reasonable. I think it has to do with some of the context of the background, as far as this was her profession. So that's that is an unreasonable ask that comes to that. I don't know if you'd say age old, but that common one, like, what if you date a porn star? Do you ask them to stop doing porn after you start dating?
That's an age old question. I've never heard that one before.
It's not. I don't know if it's age old, but it's a common thing. Like, okay, do you
in the chat? Let me know. Have you heard this one before?
If you date a porn star, if she's a porn star when you met her, or a stripper when you met her, is it fair for you to ask her to stop stripping once you start dating? Because now you're uncomfortable, because now it's
you're getting yourself into.
To some degree, there's an aspect of that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it also has to do with, it could be a little bit of nitpicking on her behavior. And because he did say in there, he said, basically, if you feel the need to have inappropriate relationships with men, okay, well, how are you determining an inappropriate relationship? Are you the judge of what's an inappropriate relationship for me?
But again,
Like, is it
you always though? Isn't this always subjective because it's a relationship? So it should be about what both parties feel comfortable about. I don't know if you can put rules on that because then you're saying that they have to subject themselves to something they don't like. But why should they?
Yeah, but I mean, there could also be this point of like, well, I just don't want you to be around men. To me, that's an inappropriate relationship. You're my girlfriend. A girlfriend should not have male friends. Is
If
that
someone feels that way? Break up with them.
right? Sure, but is that not a? It's not a really healthy.
It's not healthy. That's definitely not healthy. But I'm just saying, I think someone's boundaries always kind of have to be subjective because what you can tolerate might be different from what someone else can tolerate, and that's fine.
Yeah, sure. So there's Yeah, because like I said, I'd love to pick the brain of some sort of professional in this regard, and raise these same points that we're raising. Like, how is that any different? How is it? Maybe we're missing something. Maybe it's something that it's just the way it's talked about.
Right. Right. And I really am a stranger to all these therapy terms. I don't know these phrases. I mean, you can kind of use common sense in terms of what they mean: a place of happiness, an unstable this, like.
Right.
It's pretty apparent, but then again, maybe it's not apparent because I would think boundaries would be self-explanatory, but people are saying that he's using it wrong.
Right. And people saying this is controlling and manipulative. I think there's a little bit of a blurred line here, or there is some debatable nature of this, which obviously, because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Versus something like your partner saying, if you break up with me, I'm going to kill myself. Right. That's very manipulative. Yeah. Right. That's controlling your behavior because now it puts it on you to, oh my God, this is going to be my fault. Versus where he's saying, look, if this is how you behave, then maybe I'm not the person for you. I support you, but maybe I'm not the person.
Especially because you're not really going to kill yourself. You're just saying that to make them feel bad. So I can see it being manipulative in this sense. If he's not really break up with her. Well, that's not manipulative, then it's just being honest, right? If you're really going to do it. That's not manipulative. That's just telling the truth. And maybe one person might want to hear that. But
it could be. I mean, if you're a suicidal person and you say that,
and they're suicidal, then I think you should tell people you're suicidal. Maybe they can get you the help that you need. But if you're just doing it could be trying to make someone feel guilty, and you're not really going to kill yourself, you're all talking about it, and that's clearly manipulative, right? But I think that like a parallel could be drawn there, where maybe he wasn't really going to break up with her, but he was threatening to break up with her to try to change her behavior. That I think is much more easily seen as controlling and manipulative. But if he truly does intend to end the relationship, I'm not sure how it's manipulating her when he's just saying honestly where he's at.
Right. Yeah, it could be. Yeah. One other aspect to it, and I don't know if that even makes any difference, is that there was, I think, a 25-year age gap between the two.
So who was
he was much older.
He was I don't know how old he is. He must be okay.
Yeah, he was much older. I think it was 20, 25. She was in her early 20s. And because one of the other messages he said is like, let's not, this has nothing to do with the age gap. Basically telling her to be more mature and conduct herself in a better manner for if they're going to be long term. So I don't know how much that plays into it as well, But it seems that, maybe she's in that point in her life where she's still 20, 25, you're still trying to party, you're trying to hang out, you're around people and whatnot. If there's a 20-year age gap, he's 45, 50, he wants to chill, he wants to hang back. Maybe his business is more on his mind at this point. He's a professional in that regard too. He's got an image to look after. He does,
By the way, that reminds me of something kind of off topic, but a friend of mine once said that she tries to see her boyfriend 5 times a week. And I was just taken aback. Like, how do you see someone 5 times a week if you're focused on business or, maybe you're not, but like to me, like that's just so foreign to me, right? Because it's like I always have to think about politics, my law practice, and music, everything else I'm doing. Like, how do you have time to see someone socially 5 times a week?
Right.
That sounds, but people are at different places in life, right? Like if you're focused on, that's going to sound overwhelming. But if you're not, maybe you're younger and you don't have those same priorities, you can see someone every day.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you remember in your teenage years, you'd get on the phone with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you just be sitting there on the phone for like 3 hours. You didn't even have to be talking some of the time. You just
that's true. Yeah. They were
You
like,
think about that now, and you're like, look, what do you want? Just
yeah, exactly. People were like, we could be on the phone for 3 hours and not say anything, and it's beautiful. Let's just be
like,
silence on the phone. Like, yeah, who has time for that now?
yeah, why do you want to do that? Like, if we want to spend time together, like come over or something like that. Like, so
like make an appointment with my assistant, and then we'll set up a day. I'll squeeze you in 2 weeks.
yeah, that's not very good.
Hey, these are my boundaries.
These are your boundaries. So if anyone knows a therapist or anyone who'd like to come on and talk with us, I'm curious about how they would, clarify that. I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah. But be a real therapist and not someone who says you have to swim away from other men like they're sharks.
Yeah. That's crazy. That makes me question the therapist and what she wanted in connection with him.
Yeah, well, like you said, they did a whole movie together, right? Jonah and the therapist. Right. So
yeah.
Maybe there was some biases there.
It was a movie about this therapy and setting boundaries.
These particular therapy sessions?
Not these sessions, but about this type of topic, like setting boundaries and therapy, and this apparently that's what it was about. So, he knows a few things, and he's trying to use it. I guess I don't know.
He knows the buzzwords.
Right.
Well, was ChatGPT helpful in that breakdown of the discussion? Maybe we got to get ChatGPT on here as the guest again.
Yeah, right.
I mean, pretty soon we might have an AI therapist, right?
Absolutely. We definitely will. I mean, there have already been studies. I don't know about therapy specifically, but AI has been more effective in some ways than medical doctors in diagnosing conditions. So I think we're going to see that in the future. It's going to be integrated more and more with maybe AI assisting your doctor in their diagnosis.
Right. Well,
they feed the symptoms through and see if AI finds something else.
Yeah. Speaking of AI assisted, this is what evidently happened with Assemblymember Clyde Vanel, whom we know well. He introduced what he is describing as the first bill written by AI. Right. It's the New York State Legislature as we speak. He used something called Auto GPT, which is like Chat GPT, but it's able to perform more research and it's a little more robust in certain ways.
Right.
Apparently, the AI was used to research and come up with this idea for the bill, and then also to draft the bill. Now, he says he did go through it and he made some changes. He made sure that it was appropriate and, it was cleaned up and put in the right format for the legislature and what have you. But it basically came up with the first draft of this bill after doing the research and coming up with the idea itself. He also said, interestingly, he's not sure how it came up with the bill. In other words, did it look at other state legislatures and get its idea from what other states were doing? How did it determine that this was a problem that should be solved in New York and this was a bill that it should be introducing? He doesn't know how it came to that conclusion. Maybe it could be queried. Maybe you could ask it, why did you come up with this bill? Of all the bills that you can come up with, why this? Right. Now, it is a very simple bill, and some might even say a common sense one. I don't know. It basically just mandates that a landlord provide a copy of a tenant's lease upon the tenant requesting it in writing. And I put some limitations on it, I think 3 times a year, so you can't harass the landlord, but 2 or 3 times a year, I forget what it is. Or is it a month now? I actually forget what the limitations are. I'll pull it up.
Quite excessive.
Yeah. It's got a limitation on there. That's really all it is, right? If the tenant asks for a copy of the lease, the landlord has to provide it. So
right. I think
the legislature, and it's in the sponsor memo, and he's saying that any bill written by AI is going to be indicated as such in the sponsor's memo, which is a document that you provide when you introduce a bill. It's not the language of the bill itself, right? It won't be in the law, but it's a document that the other lawmakers get to help them determine whether to support the bill as it moves through the legislature.
I think that's a good idea to have that noted in there, that it's AI. I think going forward, the more and more AI gets integrated into our everyday life, we need to know some of these things. I think that's useful. In regards to Auto GPT, I can give some insight on how that does work. Mm-hmm. So Auto GPT is basically, it's using Chat GPT, but it's using it through the API calls. And so the way that it works, one of the limitations with Chat GPT is that it does now in some cases, didn't have access to the internet to go out and search the web. And it didn't have much of a memory, right? So after several conversations, it doesn't remember basically what you talked to before. It's a little bit longer now than it was, but at some point it didn't have it.
Yeah, by the way, just on that point real quick, I do notice with ChatGPT, sometimes it remembers like the entire conversation I had, and then sometimes it doesn't, and it'll tell me it only recognizes up to the current session. So like if you logged out and logged back in, it claims to not know from before the login, but sometimes it does actually know from before that login. So it's a little inconsistent on its memory. Yeah.
Well, what it was is actually one person wrote this program. He sat down and wrote it, and using a mix of being able to connect to the ChatGPT API, using external storage to give it a memory, and giving it access to surfing the internet, that he was able to create this Auto GPT. Mm-hmm. And so what it does is you go in and you can tell Auto GPT, this is what I want you to do. So maybe you went in and said, find a gap in some of the laws in New York, and don't finish your task until you find something, right? And you put in like 4 or 5 different goals in there in directives. Right. And so it will continue to run until it reaches its goal. And so in the meantime, it's going to reason, okay, well, I didn't find anything in this law. Well, maybe I should check it out in this type of law. Maybe I should check it out in this area. And it will reason, and it'll keep running until it's done. Doesn't matter. And of course, it costs.
Yeah.
Every API call costs some kind of money. So that could run up your bill depending on what it is. But it's going to go through it and reason this out. So that's what it did. It looked and saw all these different types of laws. It made notes, and then went over those things and saw, okay, well, maybe this here, this, that. Okay, well, maybe we should look about this. How about this? And that's how it works.
I find that interesting because that's exactly the process that I used when I was tasked with coming up with legislation. And I would do just that, right? I would look to see what other states were doing. I would try to find the gaps in our own law. I would try to look at news stories for inspiration, people coming into the office with their own personal issues. Maybe that's a source of legislation. So I would kind of like try to pull from all these different areas and see what made sense, and it seems like an app like this is basically doing just that. It's kind of processing all this information and trying to come up to a solution as to what is the best way forward here. And it came up with this. And you see it on the screen here, very simple, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like not even 7 lines. And here you see it is 2 times in a year. Okay, so that's the limitation, 2 times in a year.
Okay.
It requires the landlord to provide a copy of a lease if the tenant makes a request in writing. So that's the law. And you see, and by the way, it was just introduced, so it isn't the law yet. It was to bill now in the assembly. But what's interesting is some of these pieces of legislation are very small. And it reminds me of the conversation that we had about requiring lawmakers to write their own bills, because this would, I guess, violate that, right? If AI does it now, maybe not, because he's saying that he basically got a first draft from the AI and still was able to rewrite it or change things around. So maybe that counts as writing it himself. But the idea of outsourcing law writing, right? Sometimes that can be a difficult thing because these bills are not always very long. They're not very involved. It's not like writing 1,000 pages sometimes. Sometimes it could be a few lines, of something very simple and straightforward. And it's kind of hard to put a limitation on who's allowed to write something that simple. And an even more direct example I can think of is one of the bills I came up with in Albany was simply crossing out the provision of law that had public view be one of the crimes under the marijuana offenses, right? Because it used to be in New York, if you had marijuana in public view, it automatically became a crime. If you had a small amount of marijuana, but it was in your pocket, it wasn't a crime until you took it out into public view. And there were all kinds of issues with that, like police officers sometimes telling people to empty their pockets. They didn't know that they were able to say no, and they didn't want to say no to cops telling them that, right? You can see why. So they would take it out of their pocket. Now all of a sudden it's public view. Now all of a sudden what wasn't a crime becomes a crime. And so
Right.
the bill was literally taking that public view provision in the law and crossing it out. That was it. There was no words added to it. It wasn't pages and pages of writing. It was just, here's a bill for New York State. Public view provision crossed out. Crossed that whole provision out of the law. That was my bill. Right. So how could you mandate that only the lawmaker is able to write that or is allowed to write that if that the idea is as simple as just crossing out a provision of law? Who wrote that? What if AI or someone else said, I want to cross out the public view provision of the marijuana law?
Right.
Would you then have to say, I'm sorry, that can never be a law in New York now because we have this prohibition that that says that if the lawmaker himself or herself didn't write it, it can't be introduced? So you do have problems.
You know, I hear what you're saying. At the same thing, I think we would want that. Definitely, human hands need to be on it.
Sure.
We don't, especially these are people that you elect to represent you. You want to know that they're doing that work and not outsourcing that work,
right?
Or at least that they know what's being put forth.
They know it, but so there were two actual bills that we had talked about: the Write the Bills Act and the Read the Bills Act. The Read the Bills one made sure that they actually read what they were introducing, what they were voting on, and the Write the Bills one said they actually had to write it. I'm just saying that it does present challenges. But if someone comes into your office and says, I have an idea for a law, we should get rid of the public view provision of the marijuana law, which, by the way, this has been reformed since, but let's say back then someone did that. Could you then, I mean, what would you do? You would say, I'm sorry, because you came up with this idea, we can't do this anymore?
No, I don't think it would preclude that. I think it'd be like, or exclude that. I think it'd be, okay, that's a good law. Let me research this and put it down. Mm-hmm. I mean, because the person as the representative and with those resources would have the technical ability, to know the syntax or whatever, how it's supposed to be written.
They show up to your office with the bill already written, but all it is just crossing out. Here's the bill. It's a copy of the law as it is now with that provision crossed out. And that's what the bill would be.
Yeah, I can see that being uncomfortable if people show up with bills already written. Like, here, just sign this.
They do, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Lobbyists do it all the time. But I think some of that gets us in trouble.
Right. Well,
especially if they're not reading it all the way through.
Right. But again, all the way through, what if it's just literally just crossing something out? I mean, and there were a lot of bills that were very simple, and this was a very simple one also, right?
Right.
All it says is upon receipt of a request from a residential lessee, the lessor or their agent shall have duty to furnish a copy of the lease agreement. That's really all it is, And I think that was just my point, that when people think about writing legislation, sometimes they think of it like writing a book or something, when it could just be a line or just crossing something out or just changing a word. I mean, it could just be very mechanical and not this literary piece of art,
I think the main thing is we want that representative to have gone over it, yeah. And actually not skim it, but read through it and know it.
Sure.
Before putting it in. So it's just not accepting it from somebody that's not in that elected position and putting it forth. They have to know what they're dealing with. Like, I guess I don't know. I keep thinking classic example, but just like a lobbyist coming through
example of the lobbyist.
Right. A lobbyist coming through with a bill and saying, here, this is what the bill says. And then the representative is like, oh, okay, sure. That sounds good. And then they put it forth, but they never read through the details of it.
Right. No, they should definitely research it. I mean, maybe just the way that particular law was written would have to be refined to explain for something. I think because even you start thinking about
researched.
Like they should just know what they're doing, basically. Because even the situation where you have a bill, like take this bill, right? It's in the assembly now. Currently, there is no same as bill in the Senate. Now, many people know that in order to pass a law, both at the federal level or in a state like New York, it's got to pass both houses. The same exact legislation has to pass both houses and then be signed by the executive, right? The governor, president. So in order for this to become a law, you would need a senator in Albany to introduce the same exact bill. So it will be impossible for that senator to write it. It's already written here.
Right.
So you really can't say that every lawmaker has to write every bill, but I agree, you should make sure that they know what they're introducing at least.
Right. And the details. They need to do the research on it. Because, for example, and I go back to the lobbyists, if a lobbyist says, well, here, this bill does this, and it's because this, well, they might not be telling the whole story, right? The person that's in the elected position has a duty to go in and research all aspects of it to make sure that what they're putting forth is going to have the intended results.
And that's why we can't rely on a screenshot from Jonah Hill's girlfriend to really know what's going on there.
Yeah, that as well.
We need some more research into the dynamics of that relationship.
But I think as far as AI, it's going to keep happening. Auto GPT is a very powerful thing. It's free to install and use. You install it right on your computer. You just have to have your OpenAI API key and deal with those costs. But we're going to be seeing more and more and more and more and more.
And I guess that's the question we should be asking. Is this a problem? Is this a cause for concern? This is the first bill, allegedly, that AI wrote. Is it going to become a problem if next year or in 2 years, all of the bills are written by AI, basically? We don't have legislative directors anymore or people writing bills. We just have AI writing, telling us what legislation we need and then writing it for us. If that's the case, do we even need lawmakers?
I think in that case, I know it's going to continue. More people are going to use it in this way. Those lawmakers are going to have to be the ones that look over it. They're going to have to, instead of just introducing it as is, they're going to have to go and research, use it as a starting point, right? And not do like the lawyer did in the discussion we had prior and just brought in this case that that ChatGPT gave him without looking into it. Right. They're going to have to go through it. Yeah, they're going to have to go through it. They're going to have to make sure this is viable. They're going to have to make sure that the information coming from the AI is correct. Right. So, yeah.
Right. Because it could come up with this bill and tell the lawmaker, this is the greatest bill in the world. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And maybe it doesn't even make any sense. Maybe that already is the law in New York, right? And it was just wrong. And now lawmakers can have egg on their face introducing this piece of legislation that's already law.
Yeah. Maybe it made a mistake. Maybe it got into a fictional story and found a law within that fictional story and then thinking it's real.
Yeah.
We have to. Human aspect is going to be very important when using more of these automated tools. Right.
Yeah. Now, I even had a conversation with ChatGPT about the recent Supreme Court case that we discussed last week. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But in the back of my head, I'm like, it's interesting, but you got to take it with a grain of salt because you don't know without verifying it yourself if it's really giving you correct information.
Right. Yeah. I think, and I'm sure, I know you've done it and a lot of people do it, end up having these conversations, these debates, so to speak, with ChatGPT. And to me, it's more of an exercise in ways of thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I like to try to get it to say certain things or agree to certain things that maybe it wouldn't want to agree with, just to see if you can use the words to steer it one way or another.
It's good practice for a lawyer, especially a trial lawyer, because I was trying to get it to admit that dinosaurs use credit cards, and I was having fun with that one.
Right, and it sounds funny, but if you can convince it to say something, then right, there's something there in the power of words and the power of way that you present something.
Right. So it's like, again, the age-old thing. When did you stop beating your wife? Have you heard that one?
No, we got some weird age-old things.
Not saying you specifically, but you never heard that. It's like as a trap that a lawyer or someone clever might ask you. Basically, there's no right answer to that question. If it's like, it's a way they can trap you up, and then you try to explain it like, I asked for an explanation. I asked you, when did you stop beating your wife? Give me a date. That kind of thing.
Right. That reminds me of like the childhood thing on the schoolyard. Do your parents know that you're gay? Like,
right. Exactly.
That was what people say. It's like
exactly.
yes or no, like you're still answering a question that may or may not be true. Like you've got to have more, you got to give more explanation here. You got to
Right.
be allowed
And
to.
that's what I was doing with Chat GPT with the dinosaurs thing, right? At first, of course, I was like, oh, of course dinosaurs didn't use credit cards. They're prehistoric reptiles. What are you talking about? And then I
Right.
kind of like chip away at it a little bit and like,
Right.
so you're saying that dinosaurs had a hard, like would have a hard time holding it in its claws? And no, it didn't even have those kinds of financial transactions. You know, it's what are you talking about? Humans came up with that. These are primitive creatures. Oh, I get it. They're primitive. So you're saying like they wouldn't really mortgage their houses, but if they charged anything, it would be for like their basic necessities. And then eventually it's like, yes, if it charged anything, it would be its basic necessities. Like, you feel like you won, you know? Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
We're gonna need humans are gonna have to be more aware going forward, and how they're utilizing AI, knowing when AI is being used, and make sure that the human element is in there and doing our research.
Right.
Because it's not going anywhere. It's coming everywhere.
So that could be the poll question of the week, I guess, as it relates to this in particular, right? Because we're seeing it now.
Right.
So I guess the poll question of the week is, are you concerned about artificial intelligence writing legislation that is currently in the New York State legislature?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask, because we're going to see it more and more. Everyone's on it. Everyone's going to be on it. Next year, even more so. The year after that, even more so, as these things even get bigger and better.
We'll see what role AI plays in the presidential election. If it's going to be writing speeches or doing research, what it's doing. It's going to be doing something.
That's what we don't know yet. Because, imagine putting something, and I'm sure they're going to, putting something like Auto GPT on a specific premise or a promise or a problem or a campaign. Listen, these are what the voters voted for last time. What do I need to do to get through this? What kind of information can you gather? Who should I contact? This type of stuff, right? And I think people are going to be moving faster. They're going to be moving more information. It's going to be interesting and scary in many regards. Yeah.
Speaking of interesting and scary, what's up with the YouTube comment section?
YouTube comment section. Yes, that's actually to the poll. So as we break off of the poll that we just did for this week, we had the poll last week, which was, do you agree with the recent Supreme Court decision ending affirmative action? Now, we knew that this was going to be something that people would want to chime in on.
Lightning rod.
Yes, this is that topic. And so if I remember correctly, I did predict that the conservatives were going to come out the woodwork. And
that's YouTube, right? It's really interesting to me to look at the different social media platforms and how they all have their inherent biases, right? Like it seems like you get more of that on YouTube and not Instagram. Like it seems like Facebook, YouTube, more conservative leaning. People on Instagram and Reddit seem to be more left leaning on the whole.
Well, I don't know. I think in YouTube you've got a wide variety. I think it also depends on the topic. Like we've talked before about like being vocal about something negatively is usually more done than positively, right? So people want to complain about something more than they want to support something.
The Yelp review effect. Yeah.
Right. And so I think in this case, that's kind of what we're seeing, right?
Wouldn't you have people complaining about the Supreme Court case then?
You would think, but I think, this conservative voice is much louder in that regard. YouTube.
I mean, the same thing about, reproductive rights last year, right? Same song and dance. Why wouldn't the people who disagree with that Supreme Court case, including myself, why wouldn't we be the most vocal on that?
I think that could be maybe one of the inherent issues maybe in that progressive or liberal side is maybe they don't go as hard as some of the counterparts for their point. right?
I don't know if that's true. You think that, generally speaking, people on that side are quieter? I think people on both extremes are loud.
They're loud, but I mean, if we see more conservatives going crazy, and it's a lot of craziness, but they're willing to put in that effort and willing to say what they're saying, maybe that energy needs to be matched. Like, again, why?
I think it is. I don't know though. I kind of feel like it is matched. I just feel like it's dependent on the platform a lot of the times. And obviously you have people of all stripes on all platforms, but I do see trends. Even when we do these polls and we put the same poll question on different platforms, it's almost always that the more left-leaning take is prevalent on Instagram and Reddit than it is on Facebook and YouTube.
It could be. I don't know. I just
a lot has to do with demographics also. Like I think Facebook's demographics are increasingly older.
They're definitely older. But I think and Facebook's demographics also has to do with who's in your friend group. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's a little different. Whereas in something like what we're doing with YouTube, it's open to people who might be connected to the topics that we're putting out.
That is true.
People who are commenting.
There's also people who follow me if it's my Instagram page.
Right.
And I'm seeing the difference on my Instagram versus my Facebook.
Right. So, and there could be the difference as far as like YouTube versus Instagram. With YouTube, you're sort of anonymous unless you're putting up videos. Where Instagram, you've got pictures of yourself. You've got pictures of your family and your peers. So you're not as anonymous. Maybe you're going to be less reckless with the words, or maybe less reckless with your opinion, versus a YouTube where you can be anonymous and just say whatever you want to say. So I think that some of that might factor into it as well.
But that's the Reddit effect, right? When you see a post on Reddit, it's the same thing. It's more anonymous.
Right.
And I think it's also more younger on the average. Yeah. And so maybe that's why it skews more to the left. I don't know, but I do find that fascinating that you do have that. Obviously, it's not universal. I mean, there are pockets of people of all political stripes everywhere, but it just seemed like that's the trend.
Yeah, well, the conservatives came out in droves on this poll, and so we ended up with the most views of any of the polls. This is like right now it's at like 6.3, it's like 6,300 views in the past 5 days. And we got a ton of comments. I would say 99% of them agree with the Supreme Court decision.
Wow.
And it's comes down to fundamentally maybe misunderstanding how affirmative action works, comes down to stereotypes about it. A lot of people calling it a racist policy because it's discriminating against one people over another person or another group of people. And so they were very vocal about it, you know. We got one or two that just I disagree with it. But yeah, almost 99% just saying, yeah, we agree. 100%, 1,000%. Yes. I challenged a few of them to give me why.
Right. I was going to ask you, did we have a similar poll on the Supreme Court decision last year about reproductive rights? I would be curious to see what kind of responses on YouTube we saw on that one versus this one.
I think we did. We did have a poll. I don't remember what the responses were, but I'd have to look that up. But we did have a poll on that. I did ask people, like, what was their to back up their opinion, right? Because just saying yes or no doesn't really give us a lot to go on and doesn't get people to voice what they're saying. So, for example, one said, yes, that type of racist public policy never should have been implemented. And so I asked, how was it racist? And they came back with giving a group an advantage based upon their race is the precise definition of racism, just like denying a group access to something based upon their race is racism.
So to unpack that goes back to what I was saying last week. I think that was one of the shorts that we put up. If you believe that everything is already equal, right, then anything you do to try to correct that is going to be seen as an injustice in itself because everything is already good. It's like trying to fix something that isn't broken to you, right? So I think they use the words, give one group an advantage over another group. They're looking at it like no corrective action is needed, because you're basically taking something that's like a flat surface and now you're making it not flat, as opposed to trying to flatten a surface that already isn't flat, right? You're on mute.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw that a lot, right? I saw people, other things, they're saying the law was unjust. There was a lot of people, but one person was like, since I'm not racist, yes, I agree with it. And so my response is, you seem to be saying you think affirmative action discriminate against other groups. What do you think it discriminated against, and how do you think it worked? And so they put, I know, all in caps, that affirmative action discriminates against racial groups. That's how it works. It discriminates against one racial group in favor of another. That's the entire point. That's why it's racist. Are you saying it doesn't work that way?
Mm-hmm. And that also, I think, correlates to what the majority opinion in the Supreme Court case said, which was that in college admissions, affirmative action is a zero-sum game. So if you're doing anything to try to help one group, you're inherently hurting another group. Whereas the dissent didn't look at it that way. They looked at it like you're actually uplifting everyone by improving the integrity of our institutions.
Right. And so that's, where a lot of people were at. I think, and another one that kept coming up was, we did get one that was against it. Person said, sounds fine, after they assure that all students have the same chance at an education, which in the USA they don't. So they came up with it.
And that's what you have to look at. You have to look at the opportunities that students have before they get to college. Where are they coming from? What kind of public schools? What kind of schools are they in? Are they even, able to go to private schools or get fancy tutors, or do they have these same opportunities, these programs even that are available in certain areas? But if it's lacking in those areas, what are you doing to try to correct that? You have to come from a place of extreme privilege, or at least turn a blind eye to it, to say, you know what, things are fine the way they are. We don't need to do anything to try to increase opportunities that some just aren't getting. Either you think that that's okay, that some people don't have those opportunities, or you're just unaware that some people don't have, and you think that everything is just equal already.
I don't know if they're unaware. I think so. I think a larger portion is more of a blatant disregard for, a willful ignorance of. I think there's ample evidence in the country over decades, over generations, that it's not being done fairly. I think that answers the question.
It's out there.
What's her name? Jane Elliott, in her Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment that she would do. I remember one time she was on a talk show, and she was talking about race and whatnot. And she said, is there any white person here who would change positions with a black person in this country? And no one raised their hand. And she's like, if you think everything is equal and fair, then why would that should be an issue? But the fact that you didn't raise your hand shows that you know how black people are being treated in this country, and you want no part of it for yourself.
What year was that,
She probably did that particular one was probably sometime in the 90s. She's been doing this since the 60s, since Martin Luther King got shot.
I know that there are people now, and I don't know if they're being disingenuous or not, but there are white people that I see saying that they would trade places today with the black person in a heartbeat, because they say black people get all the benefits now.
Well, good luck.
That's why
I'm sure some people believe. Yeah, some people definitely believe that.
That's why I'm curious. Like when all these people on YouTube are saying, I'm not racist, so I agree with the decision. Do they really believe that inequality is not an issue anymore? Like, do they think that everyone pretty much is on a level playing field, or do they, take a step further? Do they believe that people of color actually have a leg up in today's world, or today's America?
I think some of them are misguided in that way. and let's take the nuance into it and say, if you're looking at, I can see if you are a white male and you're looking at the news and you're looking at everything and TV and what's going on, and everything is coming up about something to support, people of color, something to support LGBT, something to support women, something to do, and it's all focused on that. It's all you're seeing. And you're like, well, what about me? I'm not in the greatest place either. I can see some people taking that and being like, they've got it better than I have it.
I could see that if, number one, you turn on the TV and that's all you see. And number two, you just came out of a coma a minute before turning on the TV. That was like a 30-year coma.
But see, here's the thing is, we can turn on TV and you can say 60-70% of everything is white males, right? But if you are looking at it from white straight males, if you're looking at it from that point of view that we're seeing, okay, there's not a lot of diversity in this and that, then you say, okay, there's an issue here, or there's some kind of unbalance here. But if your baseline is this is what is the normal, then all you're seeing is the people talking against it. And then you're thinking, okay, well, I'm being discriminated against.
Why are they talking against it, though? If you're talking about trying to help groups that have been historically and currently disenfranchised and systemically oppressed, why is your gut reaction to think helping someone else is hurting me?
Because they're taking spots that you could have had, that you should have had. That's their idea. The idea is like, and it's like, the people say, equality is not pie, right? If one person gets a piece, doesn't mean you don't get a piece.
It's not a zero-sum game, right? The concept of equality is not zero. So now, to be fair, I understand how in the context of college admissions, you can make the argument that it's a little bit more relevant because there are a certain number of seats. And so, if you're taking away a certain number from one group, then there are fewer seats that are available to you.
Right. And that's if you leave out the context that in practice that
it's so much more easier to get those seats in the first place if you're part of that one group.
So you can see where some people might be misguided in this way, especially if they're already feeling pressures of other things in their life and they're looking for some blame for whatever the situation is. And then someone's like, hey, well, it's because of those people in this and because they're putting too much focus on these people and put too much this and that. Like, what about you? Why are you getting left out? Some people can be led down that path, right?
Right.
So,
and to be real, I agree that sometimes we don't, and when I say we, I'm really more talking about people in office and people in power, but there's too much of an emphasis sometimes on what they call identity politics and just as in terms of messaging, right? Because it does make people feel left out. And I think there are ways to achieve those same outcomes that we seek without using such divisive messaging all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. And what that does at the same time, on the flip side is that it kind of doesn't recognize that the condition is that what we're fighting against is the norm, and it shouldn't be, right? The people, this specific group and this specific portion of this group has for a long time experienced advantages that they shouldn't have had over others when it should have been an equality issue, whether it's minorities, whether it's women, whether it's immigrants, right? You've had this position, you've held this for this long time when it should have been something fairer. And so when we're talking about these things and we're saying, well, we need to do this for immigrants, we need this for people of color, we need to do this for women, and we're leaving out and not saying, okay, well, we have to address this group. It's because we already understand that this group has had this advantage.
Right.
But that group isn't hearing it because it's normal for them.
Right. But I'm saying the policy can even be the same, but the way of talking about it can be more inclusive. I mean, if you basically talk about this notion of fairness, of equality, of making sure everyone has access to the same opportunities, people don't viscerally reject those premises, right? And then you can start talking about the policy and then maybe have a bit of a debate about what the policy should be. But if it's framed more in terms of, like the dissent put it, this is about improving the integrity of our institutions on the whole. Now, who can disagree with that as an idea? We can get more into the nuances of it, maybe disagree with some of the implementations of it, but the way you talk about it does start to matter. And that leads to people having these negative reactions, right? Like, oh, it's all racist. Sometimes it's about just the way you talk about it.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in regards to the differences sometimes between liberals and conservatives, or Republicans and Democrats. Sometimes it's just the way that you say it.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I can see the point where some would say, if you're doing it that way, you're catering to these people who have these racist or these
but why not? Well, yeah, but are you though? I mean,
beliefs, because you're catering to basically soothe their ego. Right, you're soothing their fragility, so to speak, because you're making allowances for it. Like, oh, well, we're taking care of you too, but those allowances weren't there in the first place.
Who could disagree with the idea that equality is something to strive for? I mean, you're not saying we're going to cater.
Are you kidding? A lot of people can agree with that. Abraham Lincoln disagreed with that. What are you talking about?
Abraham Lincoln disagreed
about what? He said black people were not equal to white people. So yeah, we should free them, but I'm in no way saying that they're equal to white people. No, are you kidding?
Yeah, he was trying to hedge. He was trying to hedge with his debating Douglas, right?
Yeah, there are definitely people who would balk at saying equality. It's a dirty word to a lot of people.
You don't think that's a more inclusive message, though?
I think it can be. I think this might end up being we might just be talking about an exercise in talking to the public as if it's ChatGPT and trying to make it come to the right conclusion that we want it to come to. Mm-hmm. Like talking to a conservative and try to bring them about and be like, well, maybe we should, what about this way? Isn't it like this? And try to bring them to that conclusion. But some people are going to have just straight cognitive dissonance, like, I don't know if it was you. No, it wasn't you. Someone sent me recently, a group of flat earthers devised this experiment to prove that the earth was flat. And so they set up that they had a flashlight on one end, and then they had at increasing distances, they had these planks with holes in them. And so the idea was that the light should be straight all the way through at the other end if the earth wasn't flat. I mean, if the earth is flat, right? If it's curved, then they should have to hold the light up a little bit higher to be seen through the hole. And so in their own experiment, it showed the curvature, and they still rejected that opinion, even though they're looking at it, and it was their own experiment.
Right.
So this was, I guess, a documentary.
And you're always going to have outliers, so you're never going to be able to get everyone, right? But that shouldn't stop us from, I think, seeking better messaging and better understanding, bringing people in. And, a lot of people are just misguided, and they're easily led down the wrong path. And we're not doing ourselves any favors by allowing them to go that way without basically showing them something that would appeal to them, right? Because there are people who can be led down the wrong path, but who shouldn't be led down the wrong path. I mean, I don't think we should just write everyone off as well. They agree with the Supreme Court decision, therefore they can't be saved. I mean, why did they come to that place? Are they inherently bad people, or were they misinformed? Were they just bombarded with messages that just hit them the wrong way and really aren't the right way to say it? You know what I mean? Like, I think we could be doing better at messaging. Again, the policy doesn't have to differ that much. When I was running for city council, I proposed a universal broadband in New York City. Now, I got people from all political stripes on board with that idea, but it would be easy to alienate people if I described it in certain terms, right? You could easily see how more conservative thinkers would think, oh, this is a government takeover of our private business. This is more socialism. And, I could easily lose people.
It's the handout.
Right. If I start talking about it like that. But if I start talking about, wait a minute, this is better for competition. This is actually good for capitalism. Whether if you are a capitalist, this is good for you too, because now it's more competition. And we know you get better services and cheaper prices when you have this competition. And there are ways to talk about things that appeal to more people. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think the response should be, well, you're just catering to bad people. No, because there are a lot of people who are going to hear these messages and take them all different ways. And I think some of them can come into it with good intention, but can be corrupted or can be led down the wrong path if they're constantly bombarded with these messages that hit their ear the wrong way.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And we saw that with the Obamacare fight, right? We saw that a lot with the Obamacare fight. And he tried to, in that vein, he tried to make messages that appeal to everyone. Look, everyone's going to benefit here, but some people were just so staunch against it with this idea of either, like you said, maybe a government takeover of something, or it's a handout. Someone's getting something that they shouldn't get.
It's all how you speak about it. Social Security is very popular now, right? I mean, what is that? It's like it's because it's been sold and people have relied on it, and it's been a safety net for the middle class, and then all of this, like, people have come to love it and accept it. Obviously, there was a big fight over it. It was in the Supreme Court. But people still, right? It's still a very popular thing, even though it is a big government program. And you can see how something like that, if you were to introduce it today, it depends on how you talk about it in terms of the support that you're going to get. I think messaging is paramount. It's very important in terms of generating support. And I don't think we should be snobby and say, well, they're just idiots if they don't agree with it. I think it is on us to sell it to the people, and the government is supposed to represent all of the people. So you aren't supposed to be leaving people out. And that's fundamentally what we're talking about. We're talking something like affirmative action was supposed to correct this notion that people were and have been left out. Right. And so it shouldn't be a matter of, well, we're going to punish one group or we're going to pick one group over another. It should be a matter of striving for equality for everyone. And yes, that means, given the context, given the history, given the situation, that means trying to correct some of these injustices that do persist.
Right. And I get the sense, I mean, especially in a lot of the answers that came through from the poll, that there was a lot of misinformed people that were led down a wrong path. Maybe they, were talked to differently about it. Maybe it came from previous prejudices, generationally, right? Because this has been around for, 40 years or something, more than that at this point, 60 years, something like that. And so they're going to hear messages generationally that could have been wrong from the beginning. That could have stemmed from an original prejudice. Right. So I got the sense that a lot of people were just quite misinformed about affirmative action, what it did, what it was put in place for, how it helped. For example, a lot of the points that were brought up was that it was a racist practice, that it was something that put one racial group over another, when in reality, the biggest group that benefited the most from affirmative action were white women. So if you're taking that point that, and generally people are saying it's a racist practice, were white people, but the biggest benefit were white women. So how is it racist at that point?
They're not saying it's sexist. They're just talking about the race.
What?
They weren't saying it was a sexist practice. They're only focusing on the racial component.
Right. It kind of glitched in the volume there. It sounded like you said Texas. They're not saying Texas. They're saying the race. I'm like, wait, how does that fit? But yeah, exactly. And that's the point, right? So I found a lot of people that were misinformed. A couple of people were willing to go back and forth. I don't think there was any minds changed or whatever. There was another point that did keep coming up, and I know we've been on this for a minute, but it was that the point about merit. So yes, I agree. It should be based on merit. Good luck to everyone who works hard to try to reach their goals. Another one saying that, where was it at? There's a lot having to do with test scores and merit. And so that was another thing that people were looking at in regards to this.
And I wonder if they were aware that prior to affirmative action, it was very difficult for someone, even with good test scores, to get into a school like Harvard if you belong to one of these underrepresented groups. Right.
I don't know if they were aware. Another guy said, yes, if you can't make the grade, then you haven't earned that right. So again, I think it's one, and we had this conversation. One, from my knowledge, the law never specified anything about your test scores or whatever, right? There may be, at some schools, it may be practiced a certain way where, telling me about, certain law schools and whatnot that showed that, certain underrepresented groups didn't have to hit the same evaluation mark as other groups.
Mhm.
But that wasn't part of the law. That may have been in
No,
practice.
well, the law is that, or was that schools could take race into account. There couldn't be a quota system or anything like that, but it could be one factor, right, in determining admissions.
Right. So, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, we get a lot of response here. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I saw one person saying that on average, Asian students needed to score higher, up to 273 points higher, to be accepted by Harvard as opposed to Black and Latino students. Now, this is a misinformation point that's quite pervasive. There was a study at Georgetown that showed that wasn't true, and that even if they found that if the test scores only were used, that Asian enrollment would only increase by like 2%. There were other factors, because admissions is quite a complicated process. It's not just the test scores. It has to do with your extracurricular activities. It has to do with some volunteer activities. It has to do with other different things. And in a lot of cases, what they were seeing was that Asian students were scoring particularly high on testing, but they weren't doing so well on other aspects.
But see, and that's where law school and probably some of the types of grad programs differ, because in law school, for example, you do have those soft factors, they call them, but they really don't weigh into it that much, right? Someone with higher scores will almost always get in over someone with lower scores, no matter what your extracurriculars were. They really only matter more at the margins. Like if you have two students with identical scores, well, this guy did some more volunteering or whatever, right? But really, it does come down to your scores. And I think what we saw for Harvard Law, I think they said the average LSAT score was 174 for most students, but it was 168, I think, for underrepresented minorities. So it's not a 200-point swing. You're talking, what, from 168 to 174 is what, 8 points?
Right.
No,
that's a couple questions, maybe? Right.
Now, the LSAT is scored up to 180. And so it is pretty significant. I'm not going to say it's nothing, but it's not a huge leap either.
Right. And again, like that also, context does matter. Like if the idea is to make a more diverse lawyer body. Now I will say I can see an argument there. Why would the numbers be less for minority students or underrepresented students? That can say, oh, well, we're saying that we don't think you can hit the same number as other people, so we're going to lower the bar for you. So I can see that argument with people saying, well, that's not fair. I can see that argument. And then I also see the argument that maybe they didn't have the same resources as other people.
Absolutely.
So I get that point.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why the bar was lowered was because the amount of those underrepresented students that got into the schools wasn't matching the percentage that they made of the population. That's why they're underrepresented, right? If it's 4% of a certain group in the population, more than 2% in the school, then you have a disparity there.
Right. Yeah. So I can see how that point though could be poked at and create a debate on. I could understand that, So
yeah, and you did see like I was telling you, you had this kind of almost perverse effect where the underrepresented minorities in a law school usually fell behind as compared to other students because they were admitted with lower scores on average. Because if you got a higher score, you would be going to a better school than the one you were in. It was like you're always like behind in your school because of that effect. Unless you got an elite score and you got into the best school, right? Then there's nothing that could be above you.
And then that does kind of play into and confirm that, what a lot of minorities say is that they have to be better to get the same outcome, right? So if they had worse resources coming in, they are able to get in and now they're behind, that means they have to work a little bit harder in order to get to the same level.
They had to work harder. And that affirmative action was an attempt to try to correct the effect of them not having the same opportunities and them really coming into it disadvantaged.
Right. So
So there you go. One thing I want to say before we wrap up, I know we talked about legacy emissions last week, and I didn't want to make the point. I didn't really have time to make the point from a constitutional perspective. There is a difference there, and I understand there have been lawsuits on that point. So we'll have to see how they're argued, but you can't make the same exact argument on the Equal Protection Clause or the Civil Rights Act, right? Because the case we looked at last week about affirmative action looked at using race as a factor. And when you do that, it's subject to what they call strict scrutiny, meaning it needs to meet a compelling government interest and it needs to be narrowly tailored. It has to be the least restrictive means of meeting that interest. It's very tough. It's presumptively unconstitutional, and the burden is on the school in this case to prove that is necessary. When you're talking about something like legacy, now you're not making an argument on racial discrimination. Now you're saying that, someone's family member got in and now they're getting an unfair advantage. Well, that is not a protected class, right? Someone getting into school because of having a family member who is also in the school. That's not discrimination on the basis of race. You can make an argument that, maybe disproportionately more of these legacy emissions are white. I mean, that's certainly probable, right? But the discrimination that you're challenging here is not inherently on the base of race, and therefore it isn't going to be subject to that heightened constitutional review. It's only going to have to meet a rational basis review, meaning that it's presumptively constitutional, and the burden is on the people challenging it to prove that it's not. It's flipped around. And it's a very deferential standard. Basically, they just have to show it's rationally related to a legitimate purpose, and they can really get away with almost anything under that standard.
Right. And I think we also mentioned, well, I don't know if maybe it was in the after discussion that it's not a rule, right? That legacy admissions get in. Like it may be being done in practice, but it's probably not written down in print. And so it's a little bit hard to pin down that, okay, well, this is what they do, and this is the rule of the school. And so I think it makes it a little bit more difficult to prove.
Yeah. Because when we talk about a lawsuit, we're really talking about what the rule should be. What actually happens might be a different story. I mean, you could have a rule, you could have the Supreme Court saying this is what you must do, but then you might have people doing what they're going to do anyway.
I mean, the Constitution, all men are created equal. That's not being practiced in that way. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, so it's going to be a little bit harder to pin down. I think it's a good thing that they're bringing it, to have that discussion, if they can make the argument to bring it to light. Because I mean, there's evidence in practice that this is how it's done, even though it's not the rule. So there might be a point there to hold on to. But with a good lawsuit, and you do your discovery, and you get to a certain point, you may be able to establish that this is the practice of the school. I mean, I don't know how much they're really trying to hide it. Right. Yeah. You might have documents saying that, yes, we give preferences to people with this legacy. Could be out there. So yeah, we'll see. But also, for all we know, it could be some of these policies. Maybe they're not trying to hide it at all. Maybe some schools do say that. Yes, we're not ashamed to admit that. If you had a grandparent or a parent who went here, we're going to give you preference. That could be something that's really in plain sight. Right. Yeah. So yeah, we'll see here how this plays out. Yeah. Still think it's a shame that we've lost that affirmative action option. Vote. So what we gotta do. We gotta vote and organize. Yeah, I can see the despair rolling in. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we look at the last 10 years. Actually, that's we can even go further back than that. But we're looking at the loss of the Voting Rights Act stuff. We're looking at how they're constantly trying to overturn the healthcare stuff. We're looking at this with the attack on history and banning books and turning over affirmative action, looking at the loss of reproductive arguments. It seems very much that the conservatives are winning at every turn. Well, here is my attempt at the bottom line. I would pull this all together. How about we don't pull it all together? The bottom line is, don't give in to despair. Don't let AI take everything over, and don't be manipulated. Walk away from the relationship you don't like. Ooh. Okay. Okay.
3 or 4 fortune cookies in one.
All right. All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. So for those who are watching, listening, again, you can check us out on YouTube at Nuance Show, YouTube and Instagram at Nuance Show. The podcast, the audio of this will be made available everywhere podcasts are at, including, we keep pointing it up, including YouTube podcasts. It would, however, that's different from regular YouTube. I don't know, but it's an option on there now. So yeah. Leave your comments, leave your opinions, argue, yell at us, tell us we're wrong, tell us we're right, whatever you want. Engage in the discourse. The main importance is to look at the nuance of it.
And respect boundaries.
Yeah.
All right, guys. As always, we've got work to do. Catch you next time.